engineer at Viridity Technologies and its sister company, Orchard Digital Marketing here in Cincinnati. Earning his Bachelor of Science in Astrophysics at the University of Cincinnati, where he trained neural networks to decode telescope data. He later earned his MS, or Master of Science in Business Analytics, from UC's Lindner College of Business. He builds AI-powered tools that speed up workflows, deliver predictions, and turn complex data into decisive action, always keeping the human in the loop. Let's give a round of applause to welcome Aedhan Scott.
Thank you so much. All right, so my talk, less hype, more launch, building useful AI for marketing teams. I hope you're all here for that. If you're not, welcome anyway. A little bit about myself before we get started. As this was mentioned, I got my bachelor's in astrophysics here at UC. I did a lot of machine learning on telescope data. I built cognitive neural networks to process that data. And then my capstone for that was a full data pipeline simulation for the Antarctica telescopes called ICEP. Many of you are astronomy nerds. That'd be a weird Venn diagram if you were, but you know, it's possible. And then for my master's, I did all of my research and my capstone through the Lindner Applied AI Lab that you may have heard mentioned during the introduction this morning. It's a pretty great organization. I built a prototype chatbot that allowed students to enter their Canvas keys and export a full course schedule right into their calendars, as well as ask an AI questions about, you know, what assignment was due when and the content of that assignment for everything on Canvas. My capstone was building an AI autograder for discussion board posts where a professor could put in their rubric and then hit go, and it would go through all 300, 350 discussion board posts, and you know, we're done. A couple of the things I've done most recently for work. I was, for a while, the AI specialist at the YMCA of Greater Cincinnati. I helped them deploy subject matter experts, as they call them, 2 different branches across the country. I worked with Amazon Web Service engineers to build and deploy a demo for something they're calling the YMCA AI to all of their branches. I consulted for the UC Office of Research. I built a program for them that lets them talk directly to their databases with regular English instead of SQL and wasting some poor data analysts' time getting the answers back. And I currently am an AI engineer at Viridity Technologies. We do a lot of AI tool development, custom data pipeline software, really whatever the client needs. And it scratches that itch of I have a new problem to work on every month, and that's definitely the way that I prefer things. So enough about me. If you read the abstract of this talk, you'll know that I promised you some demos, which is always exciting as the presenter to go through a live demo. And we will get there, but first we need to frame the conversation a little bit so you get the most out of those. So something that we have to think about before we go any further, and this comes up a lot in this kind of AI discussion, is what counts as real value? And there are a lot of answers to that, and there's a lot of good answers, a lot of dumb answers. So what I'm going to go with is straight back to Business 101, right? As a business, you should be increasing revenue and cutting costs. Otherwise, you don't get to be a business anymore, right? That's kind of, you know, that's the 101. So what can AI do, what AI should be doing? One of those 2 things, right? And what AI can do is either something a person can't do, and this is a pretty rare niche use case. Most of the time, AI can do something that a person can do just faster, right? And, well, why do we care about this? Well, we care about getting the work done faster so that we free up the human beings for work which is difficult, creative, and most importantly, high value. So where does AI fit? It fits a lot of places. It fits in research, right? Exploration, information retrieval, image retrieval, content drafts, right? Writing copy, changing languages on an advertisement, drafting images for brands and marketing, which we'll get to a little bit later in my presentation. And then predictions, right? Filtering quality leads from bad ones, adaptive ad spend, strategic suggestions for marketing campaigns, this kind of thing. There are, of course, a lot of danger areas as well. Legal and compliance, that's a super big danger area. There's lots of liability to be had there. Things like brand voice sign-off, right? Anything with personally identifiable information in it, crisis communication, and then, of course, in a more general sense, uncited facts and external knowledge. So we've had AI in marketing for longer than we think, right? I mean, we have Google right there gobbling up your data, as it always has and it always will. I had a professor who always used to say that the two people who know you better than yourself are God and Google, and I think that is becoming increasingly true. We have, of course, had computer programs and AI of some kind or another for a long time, and of course, we've had people even longer than either software or AI in marketing. So people, software, AI, which should we be using? And of course the answer is yes, right? They have their different strengths and weaknesses. People are creative, they understand context, they can do things differently or do things the same. Software is not creative, right? It doesn't understand context, but it can do something the exact same way 100 billion times or whatever that number is when I just bashed zeros onto the keyboard earlier. And there's no problem, it's just infinitely replicatable. AI, being kind of the new kid on the block, it understands some context, it mimics creativity in a probabilistical sense, and it cannot, for the large part, do things the same way twice in the way that software can. So how do we get the most out of AI in our workflows? Well, the answer to that is guardrails. And when I talk about guardrails, I don't just mean making sure the AI doesn't use a swear word, God forbid, or something like that, right? I mean more in the sense of giving it direction and purpose. And in the same way that you wouldn't just, throw things at a coworker or an employee and hope that they, catch it, right? If you want good output, you want good input. You want to set your fellow human beings up for success. And so you want to do that with AI as well. You want to set up your AI for success. And so you should be using, approved knowledge bases, have clear instructions, client-scoped information for the inputs. The outputs, you want it to be citing sources, claim-checking prompts, red flagging terms, and then the most important guardrail, of course, is the people, right? Human in the loop is a phrase you're going to hear from pretty much everyone talking today. I know that it was mentioned in the keynote earlier. That's because it's just a really good way to say it, right? You want people there for sanity checks. And most importantly, you want people there to maintain the decision rights. You never want the AI to actually make the decision for your company, for your marketing campaign, for anything, really. So that all said, it is demo time. So we're going to go through a bit of a context, action, result framework. I'm going to set up the problem and then what we use to solve the problem. And then I'm going to actually show you how it works. So for one example, humans write content to put on client sites that we manage, researching keywords manually, writing drafts, editing the drafts, making the articles, customizing the article, This is a time-intensive process. Some parts of the writing process are, of course, creative and should stay with the human being, but there are other things that are automatable, like a lot of the research and the drafting and, hyperlinking in the customization stage. Using ChatGPT, it's generally given us bad results. It's robotic, it's not replicatable, and it can't access the data in our own databases. So what do? Well, we built a program called Grover. It's a software built for creative teams. It greatly reduces the time it takes to finish articles. And from a bird's eye level view, it takes the input articles, retrieves relevant client location context, and then it generates custom articles about those client locations. The Grover architecture is as follows. You have the user provides input, goes to a data collection step, which looks through the web pages on the client. It looks through the database information we have on the client, and then it takes things and sends them to the context instruction building portion. And this is what I mean by guardrails, where everything is very one thing in, one thing out. It's self-contained. It's not going to go off the rails because it's been contained and funneled towards the direction that it needs to go. All right, so now I will attempt to screen share this. there we go. So we'll start with the input article, which was written by people. A basic copy document. We're talking about independent living for a community or a collection of senior living communities that's one of our clients. And so the articles on the websites are things like, how independent living boosts health through social connections and why social isolation is a health risk, right? The details aren't as important, but you'll see what the program is able to do with this generic input article. So we'll go back to here, we'll upload the file, and then it pulls all the information in automatically, the content, the title, and everything. And then we can access the database, right, all of the approved data for the AI to work with. From our database, we'll click on a community we want to customize the article for. Let's do Danbury here. It pulls up relevant information in the database we have on that client. In this case, senior living community, it's going to be things like memory care, assisted living, that kind of thing. So we'll leave those two on, take memory care off. Then you can include data from the website, and then we can add custom instructions. And no matter how guardrailed and funneled everything is, custom instructions are always an incredibly important part of the process and generally supersede everything. So we'll do something in here like use chocolate cake as an analogy once. And then we'll look for a chocolate cake analogy in the output. And we'll misspell analogy because I feel like it. So then we hit customize, and then it does a whole bunch of stuff right off the bat. It loads the community data, the care areas, the data on that location, processes, loads the details for the two care areas we selected and not the one that we didn't. It scrapes the characters from the website, and then it sends the request off to whichever API we're using. If there was, for instance, any data in here that wasn't public knowledge, then we would send it to one of our local LLMs. But in this use case, totally fine, it's going out to ChatGPT API. One of the interesting things you'll see here in a moment when the request comes back is that it's able to look through and find all of the web links related to this client's location, and it will actually automatically hyperlink. So it'll be like, visit the About page to learn more, right? And on the About page will already be hyperlinked in there. And I mean, it's 2025. We shouldn't be putting our own hyperlinks in the documents, in my opinion. Well, the AI is loading. Can answer any questions about Grover so far. Yes?
So how would you go about building this then? Or does that come later?
Right, so that's a good question. For those of you who are more technically inclined, the stack is a Flask backend server with a view like JavaScript on the front end, and then they just communicate with REST calls mostly. For those of you who aren't so technically inclined, it's in two parts. It's the part that you see, and then the part on the back that talks to the AI and goes and grabs data from the database and all of that stuff. And generally speaking, it's all about, we give the AI as little as it needs to accomplish the job, and not any more than that, so it doesn't get confused. But also not any less than that. And we get there through a lot of trial and error, mostly. So we have the output here. We have similar content, but now it's specific. So we can see here, we're referencing Danbury specifically. It takes us to the About Us page. And if I click into that, it actually takes us to that client location's About Us page. Let's look for another one. The gallery. Now I'll show you this one just to prove the first time wasn't a fluke. It is actually doing this correctly. Okay, there we go. There's that client's gallery site as well. And let's find our chocolate cake analogy. Good old Control F. And there it is. Like a great chocolate cake, the right ingredients, friendship, routine, and purpose combine to create something truly nourishing. Want a closer look at life here? Explore our community gallery. Perfect. And then we have a little output at the bottom, which tells us the tokens it used, which is fancy AI talk for pretty much the words. And then the estimated cost of doing that little article generation. So it looks like I owe my boss a penny at the end of this talk. And then, of course, you can save or download or copy, go back through the process, all of that stuff. right, any questions about Grover?
So I don't know on what basis you bill, but I know that, for instance, Deloitte ran into a circumstance where they were reducing some of their rates for a while because of the inclusion of AI in their projects. So when you're automating more of these tasks, how does that impact, your relationship with the client and the billing aspect of it?
It's a great question. So it can happen in a couple of ways. One of them is we just reduce the cost, right? Because if we're billing them for 20 hours to just throw out a number here to make an article, right? And now it takes us 5. Well, they can spend that much less money, or we can give them 4 times as many articles, right? Like whichever one they like. On the other hand, there are other places that we can spend more time on now that people aren't bogged down in some of the weeds, right? We can spend more time on the research phase, for instance. We can get more interesting citations or inclusions in other parts of the articles. And so the articles might take the same amount of time, they're just that much better. Now that the AI is doing a lot of the customization, we can really nail and spend extra time and have extra human reviewers and that kind of stuff for the main article. Did I see another one?
What model are you using behind the scenes for this?
So the actual API calls, there's a little drop down on the top here. We talk to GPT-5 a lot. I got everybody off of O1 recently at my company, finally over to 5. And that's mostly the preference of the writing team. Although they can also, they have different models that they can access. Yeah.
I'm not a tech guy. I'm just wondering, how do you assess the quality of the output that generated? How do you figure out if it is not making a mistake or?
Right, and the answer is human beings, right? I mean, it's the sanity check.
But there's not like an adversary AI agent that does a check or something?
So there's a couple layers on the back end where it checks like, is the article long enough? That kind of thing, and then if it's not, then it kind of goes back through and redoes it. But for the most part, we're assessing the output by having the creative team look at it and say, is this like good, right? Is this something we would write? And then we did that with this tool specifically for months, like literally months before we ever tried to use any of its output. Just fine-tuning it, fine-tuning it, fine-tuning it. All right. To switch this one back. And back to the presentation. Okay. The next problem.
You had a
Marketing
couple.
agencies have, oh, sorry.
I was going to say there were a couple hands.
There was a couple questions.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So, back to Grover
Yeah.
now. So, when you were fine tuning it, did you end up building a repository of like, this is examples of sort of responses we're looking for that you then also fed into as like, this is our goal state, to give it those examples and have it establish those guardrails?
We did do that, and it wasn't stuff the AI made, it was stuff that the people made, that we thought, this is a really good example that we should be.
So how would this product work for, say, like a new company that doesn't have a lot of copy readily available to model something after? Or would you not recommend it for like a newer company with less material to build from?
It's a good question. It kind of depends on how important your voice is to you, I guess. Because if you want consistency in the output, you do need some degree of consistency in the input. And so if you don't have a lot of data to give it, then it's going to sound like it's a different person writing it every time on the output, which maybe you do want, maybe you don't want that. All right, we'll go to the next one, just for the sake of time, and we can come back around at the end if you need anything else. Marketing agencies have a tremendous amount of data on their clients. This data is difficult to keep track of, sift through, especially on the fly. We have a large amount of visual media as well. That we need to quickly locate and retrieve, and sometimes the tiny details are important for branding guidelines, campaign messaging, that kind of thing. So what we did was Chorus, built internally for client-facing teams, but also for others. We use it to maintain databases on, quickly retrieve information about, and receive guidance related to our clients. So we'll take a quick look at the architecture here. I built it and I don't understand that diagram. So we'll look at the better architecture here. We go through what's called a intent classification system, and this is going back around to the guardrails I mentioned. You get a lot better output from your AI if you're very clear with it about what it's supposed to be doing, right? And so what we're doing here is when you give it a question, the first thing it does is figure out what did you mean by that? Like what did you actually mean by that? Are you trying to get me to show you something? Do you want me to write you something? Am I finding a file, making a file? Am I building something? What am I actually doing, right, as the AI? So that's what this does. And then we go down a different path. From there, it's all pretty similar. You acquire the relevant data on that client or the request, and then you go through one of the hard-coded with software things that it can do, like generate a chart or go find an image from a database, that kind of thing. So the example database I'm going to be using, we're going to pick on Kroger, because local Cincinnati stuff. So there's some images like this in the database, some food stuff, private selection logo, that kind of thing. And then there's text and PDF in the database as well. Things like total media spend, CPM, CPE, audience insights, video creatives, that kind of thing. So just keep an eye out for that kind of stuff as we go through the demo here. Okay, so Chorus, it's modular between data sets, the Chorus model, and what we call the bots. So the data set is the data set, right? I built one here because it can take a couple minutes to upload and time is precious, but it has the images and chunks of text and PDFs like I alluded to earlier. The interesting thing about this tool is what's called the Chorus model. So if we go into the test Chorus, you'll see that we have responding LLMs and we have evaluator LLMs, LLMs being large language models. And so we have, ChatGPT 5 and a Claude Sonnet actually answering the question. And then we have two of those, and then a llama actually evaluating the answers of those responding LLMs. And so by having this extra layer of, you almost call it like democracy, right? You greatly reduce the amount of incorrect answers and the amount of hallucinations that the responses give you, because the evaluators pick up on the responders being incorrect in that sense. It does take longer to get an answer, but between the answer being wrong and taking a little bit longer, I know which I think. So we'll use this one. And then the bots. So we have Kroger bot here that I built earlier. We have the system instructions, of course, your helpful chatbot that works for marketing agency as Kroger is one of its clients, ... All very important to have lined up and hammered out. Like I mentioned earlier, the instructions are usually the most important piece of the operation. So these are the system instructions. You pick what data set you want, you pick the Chorus model, and then the RAG result count is just how much information do you want it to dig through before it gives you an answer. So let's go through a test here. We'll talk to KrogerBot, and we'll give it a softball as the first question about Kroger, our client. All of this data is synthesized, by the way. These aren't actual CPE numbers, just in case anyone was wondering. So let's ask it, what was the spend on private selection in August? Something nice and easy like that. And then we'll throw the debug panel on, and a bunch of stuff is going to start happening here really quickly. So we're classifying user intent. We've determined that the user's inquiry was one of text, and so the AI is now going to respond with text and not do any of the other things, but we're doing specifically this thing, right? We've guardrailed it all the way to the finish line of what it has to do. It is retrieving the context from the data sets and it's telling us how many chunks it's looking through, and then it comes back with the answer, right? And over on the debug, on the left, that you can see here, we have two responses, right? Response 1 and response 2. And then we have the votes. We can see that all three of the evaluators voted for the second response. And so that second response is what we actually get. And that's what the end user sees. And if we didn't have the debug on, they would be none the wiser that that's what was occurring on the back end. Interesting thing about this is similar to what ChatGPT 5 actually does by itself when you use it regularly through OpenAI. And that was kind of neat to see that I was barking up the right tree with that idea for Chorus. Okay, let's get a more interesting question. Show me the private selection logo. So it should go through the database. We're classifying user intent. User intent find image, and okay, we're done. It went and it found the image in our database, in our system, and it pulled it up for us, right here. Now let's do another thing with Chorus. Let's modify an image. Take this picture, and then we'll put the name in so it knows which one we're talking about. And change the background to navy blue. Leave everything else the same, right? So let's see what that does. Classifying user intent. This should be generate image. Yep, user inquiry is generate image, pairing image generation, and then it says we're using this image as the reference image, and then it'll generate an image with AI that takes both my text and also the picture I pointed it to in the relational database, and send both of those off to the image generating section. While this is loading, are there any questions about Chorus so far? Yeah.
In the debug for the previous text query,
Yes.
both AIs gave the correct answer, but they all voted for the second one.
Yes.
So that's, you just said if they agree, just choose one?
Yeah, so the logic is set up, they always have to vote for one of them.
Okay.
And this, oftentimes they do get the answer correct. A lot of the time, we're doing 2 and 3 for speed, but when we actually use this, it's more like 8 and 17, that kind of thing, and the answers take like a couple of minutes. Also, something that we noticed in an early iteration of this was AIs really like to vote for themselves. Like they really like to vote for themselves. And so what we had to do was actually obfuscate who generated what answer. And so they don't get to see, they see answer 1, 2, 3, they don't get to see what model wrote the answer. So if they know that the model that's them wrote the answer, they vote for that. But if they don't, that like it entirely washes that problem away.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Actually, that was gonna be my question. I really like the ensemble way of doing it.
Yeah.
Have you done any like calibration of evaluating that voting threshold? You know, like at a certain threshold, you have a certain level of precision using like human labeled answers.
Yeah, so there's, I don't have any of the charts on me, unfortunately. We did do some initial testing with that, and we don't usually get more than like 8 responses or so. It's not helpful. And then as far as the amount of votes, we need like some odd number greater than that number, and then it kind of comes down to a somewhat unscientific process of, man, this feels about right.
Fair.
So here we go. Here's the private selection logo. Came back from the image generator with a navy blue background. Awesome. Let's make a chart. Generate a line chart of, let's do like private selection spend for all months, 2024, 2025. And then let's see if it gets the intent right. Okay, cool. Intent, generate chart. So it's going down that process. It knows what we want us to do, and it's doing that thing. The astute of you will notice that there's not going to be the month of May on the x-axis for this one, and that's because there is no May data in the data set. Any other questions?
So for the chart, how do we validate that it's correct?
So again, it kind of has to be, at a certain point, it has to be a human being looking at it. So you can write tests for the data it spits out, because you can ask it, you can say like, respond in the JSON format, or just say the exact answer with the number in this format and no words, and then you can run that through like a program to check the accuracy. When it's something like, a visual, you really have to, for a smaller company, especially like who I work for, don't have the resources to go rent like $1 billion of compute somewhere. You use human beings to evaluate the output. Okay, there we go. So it's not going to win any data viz awards, but that's a line chart. Awesome. So that's a good taste of what Chorus can do.
Sorry, maybe a quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
So the So the data came from the database that we have as part of our resources, is that correct?
Yes, so the database and the data sets up here is connected to this bot right now. So
Okay,
it's modular, so you can have any bot with any database with any course model. You can just swap them around, you can add multiple data sets to a bot, whatever.
and is there a, what's the method of the data transfer? Is there like a MCP server, or is there like a, what's the method of querying the database? Like,
Yeah, so there's actually, I guess there's two databases here if you want to get into the technicality of it. So there's one that keeps the images and they're JPEG form, right? And then there's a RAG database which keeps them in its vector form. And so when we ask the question, show me the picture of whatever, it finds that picture in the RAG database, and then it finds the associated actual JPEG that's stored elsewhere. And then it pulls both of those back. And so when we're querying all of this like text and stuff gets stored in a RAG database, and then the other copies of it are kept on like another file system that it can reference, basically.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When it comes to RAG databases, do you have preferences as to applications and software to use?
I'm fairly tech agnostic with that kind of thing. I use ChromaDB a lot just because it meshes nicely with my Python experience from astrophysics. But that's just because that's what I'm better at, which is what I default to.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to walk you through a little bit. I alluded to it with the change private selection logo to have navy blue on the back. We're going to talk a little bit about design ideation, super fancy words. We're going to build a product in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to take you through that process, right? So you can start with the image generation piece, which I think is slept on in a lot of ways. You can, if you know what you're doing, very easily make something like a beer brand, for instance. And this is based off of a true story at my marketing agency. Obviously not Bearcat beer, we would have had some for you to drink. This is fake, but this is an alike story, right? So starting render, 4 different beer can designs, completely white backdrop, early image render of a product design, ... And then we get something like this with that kind of input, right? And this is true if we can do this in chorus, we can do this just talking to ChatGPT Sora, like whatever that is, right? And then we can take another step. We can use a much nicer font for the text. Give me 4 variations of red and black. So you get red, black, black, red, white, black, white. These are all the exact prompts I use, by the way. So if there's a misspelling in there, it's because I put it in wrong. Put a red claw mark on the black beer can. What does that look like? Looks like one of those two. I went with this one, by the way, just personal preference. Okay, make just 2 cans. One that's black with the red claw mark, ... So now we're here. Make the font look like the Cincy Light font, a little curly and diagonal. And then we inject another image so it knows what it's looking at. And then it gives us this. And it inferred, left to right up, instead of the other way around, even though I didn't really specify. Add thin counter-colored bands at the bottom and the top of the can, and now we're here. And that whole process, a little less than 25 minutes when I went through it by myself. And most of that was me actually thinking about what I wanted it to look like. That was me being slow, not the AI here. We have 25 minutes from an idea to a pre-render to you could give that to a graphic designer and you could make something with it. From that design, many other things, right? Just create a beer tab for this beer. You got that. Create a 12-pack case. There we go. And then under half an hour, you have a brand. And we can put a little action shot in here in the ice scoop. And if you look really closely, of course, you can tell this is AI generated. There's not condensation on the cans, and this ice cube is kind of up in the can a little bit. But if I'm trying to impart what I have in my head of what I want this to look like, and I have zero artistic skill whatsoever. Like I would have failed finger painting in kindergarten if that was an option. So between me drawing out a sketch and that, showing it to someone with actual creative skill, that's going to get the point across a lot better. And that happened faster than I could have drawn a sketch out of what I have up in my head. Okay. Recapping everything we went over, keeping in mind the guardrails and what provides value and what AI is good for and what it isn't. We went through Grover. It's highly structured, right? One thing in, one thing out. It's automatable, but it's not algorithmic. And we're keeping the humans very much so in the loop. Chorus, it's versatile, it has structured layers. There's information retrieval, there's the image generation and editing aspect of it. And then of course we are determining the user intent as the very first step so that we can set it up for success along the rest of the way. Putting it all together, you have AI that gives you real value, right? It fits, you're not using it where you shouldn't, and you are where you should. And then most importantly, you have guardrails set up absolutely everywhere, right? We're keeping the human being in the loop. We're making sure that the human has agency throughout the whole process. And then we are making sure that all of the decisions are made by a human being. And there's a couple AI versions of me that I made at work one Friday afternoon. The little Peaky Blinders over there. And yeah, if anybody's interested in talking about any of that stuff, feel free to reach out. If anyone wants to trial a demo of Chorus at their company, I'm more than happy to hook that up too. And I'm sure there's going to be some, so I will ask for questions. Absolutely. What do we want to know?
I'll ask one.
Yeah.
I'm a researcher, not a techie guy. So I'm looking to know some of the challenges you face that you think people can think about solving, that need to be solved when you build these kind of things.
Yeah. Going way back to the start of the talk, AI can do two things. It can do something people can't do, which is very rare, and something people can do but faster. That's where most of my effort focuses, is can we free up employees from doing tasks that they don't need to be doing, right? So they can focus on other things, so we can have more output. And a lot of that, it's not always super obvious. Sometimes it's really obvious, like we have this manual step where if someone has to spend 3 hours every week taking data from point A to point B, right? And that's a software thing that can be taken care of through regular pipeline. But maybe somebody has to spend a ton of hours trying to gauge customer sentiment analysis off of a website. Maybe we did like an advertising campaign, you want to know what people thought about it, right? You can pretty easily, AI is really good at sentiment analysis. Like old programs couldn't understand sarcasm, and AI is actually really good at understanding sarcasm. And so it'll know that a customer who said, I just love going here and waiting 2 hours in line, right? That's you and I know that's a negative. And old software would say that's a positive because they said they love it, obviously, right? And so AI is very good at that kind of thing. And so wherever a human being has to look at that and say, oh no, manually that's a negative, not a positive, having AI do that instead of them allows them to do something else that's more important, like work on the actual campaign, right?
So the challenge is in figuring out what can be done by the AI engine quickly and effectively that will give high benefit to the human user.
Absolutely, and there's certainly a priority list that begins to form once your stakeholders and your leadership sits down and really thinks about it. And also having the employees who actually do the job be part of that meeting, I've found, is a direct indicator of whether your AI efforts will succeed or not. Because they know what they're wasting their time on, and they know what would be hard for an AI to do and what would be easy most of the time.
want to make one comment about you say. In fact, I like your comment about it, like let people involve and make decision instead of let AI make decision. But then there is one example. It's DeepSeek. That person created DeepSeek. That person, before he created DeepSeek, his success in the company let the AI do this stock decision instead of human make a decision because some people may be too greedy, some people do like conservative, but let the AI make the decision for you and they become very successful. So that is one example. Sometimes AI can do better job than human being. And in fact, like when people put some like limitation of this, like help the AI to make a decision, you need some knowledge on that. You have the personal knowledge, right?
Right.
So this maybe require a lot like engineering or this kind of knowledge to answer this job. But for some very basic like decision, AI probably can do better job than the normal person.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely in some ways.
This
And
is
of course,
just one example surprised me a lot.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was a student, I was tell my student, not let the program make a decision for you. You should make a decision. But that is the example. They are very successful and the stock.
yeah, it of course, everything that I've just told you, half of this will be outdated in about a year, right? And that's just kind of where we're at right now. When I look for AI news to keep track of things, anything older than a month is pretty much no longer relevant, and so I just automatically filter that out. Yeah, so that's an interesting example. One that I remember specifically is that they have an AI that's way better at identifying, maybe this is mixed up. They can either tell someone has heart cancer based off of like a mammogram, or it's the other way around. They know it's breast cancer off of like a heart scan. I'm not sure which one it is, but one of those two things, the AI is way better in that they can actually do it, whereas a human being looking at it cannot tell. And so, like I said, there's certainly things AI can do that people can't. Not a lot of them come up in like marketing and technology.
Okay, question.
Yeah.
I got two questions. So one, with a lot of marketing teams, they might not have the same coding capabilities as you do. Do you recommend any no-code or low-code tools to do some of this work with as well?
It's a great question. We have, say we, I mostly mean I, have used Nine. I believe it was one of these event sponsors actually. So it's a no code. You still need to know some technical stuff to use it effectively, but that can be a good option. There's certain workflows you can set up within the OpenAI ecosystem. I know there's been a lot of stuff that just came out recently. They've been trying to kind of build that up, and then you can also, using Claude, which is Anthropic, that model, it can do a lot of renders inside itself. Like if we go, what is this? This diagram here, right? I had written down what I wanted the photo to look like, and then I gave it to Claude, and then it rendered this image inside its like text box as I was talking to it. It's like, here you go. That's it's called a mermaid diagram. If any of you've ever heard of that, it's how you build like software architecture flows, that kind of thing.
I got another question for you.
Yeah.
So now moving to the people that can code and develop and so forth, do you have any best practices when maybe using like a model as a coding assistant or something like that?
Just remember the emphasis on assistant. I think this is the important part because those things go wrong just so easily. And then however much you would, test and double check an intern's work, you probably want to do twice that much. When you're looking at AI code. It is extremely helpful for certain things, but it's definitely proportional to the skill of the person using it, what you can get out of it. And then I do not at all trust or use pretty much anything AI generates when it comes to we're handling like the authentication key exchange, like that kind of thing. That's done entirely by us, just because it's not worth the risk of the added productivity. I mean, like the image display in the chat box and the JavaScript piece, like yeah, whatever, have AI do that, but like not the login. No. We got 5 minutes, 1 or 2 more questions.
I know you said month after month, the information almost becomes outdated, but I'm gonna ask you for a prediction.
Okay.
For the coders, what languages do you see have lasted through these iterations and are still around? And what do you think the future languages that are gonna be most important will be?
That's a good question. So AI is good at stuff there's a lot of information about on the internet, and it's bad at stuff that there isn't. So if you ask it to do a simple thing in Python, it will pretty much get it right every time. If you ask it to do a simple thing in assembly, it will never, ever, ever, ever get it right the first time, because there's just way more out there on the internet of like people asking for help with how to like print hello world in Python than there is in assembly, right? And so it's knowledge is pretty directly proportional to that as its ability to do something. And so in terms of what AI is good at doing, or what it knows a lot about, that's kind of a direct effect of what's out there on the internet. I know that some people are worried about a kind of like snowball effect of misinformation, where you have AI write an article about a thing, and then the thing looks at a bad source, and so the article itself written by AI becomes a source for the next AI that goes in web scrapes, and then it writes an article, and then the third one comes in. And now you have all of these sources, and they're all wrong, like unequivocally, easily provably false. But there are like 25 of them, and there's 50 of them. And I mean, this is a thing in scientific literature, even in papers. There's been a massive spike in the words used most commonly by AI, and the amount of M dashes in research papers up on arXiv, and that kind of stuff. So I've got off topic a little bit, but my prediction would be what there's a lot of out there on the internet, generally speaking, is what will continue to be useful.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
How do you think about putting guardrails and stuff when you're thinking about scale? So I think the 2 examples you gave were very specific, right?
Yes.
The first one, I have a very specific thing. I can write a really specific prompt, but as soon as I want to write something else, none of that still holds.
Yes.
And on the other one, on like, how much data you put in, like they were both very condensed,
Yeah.
but I think like that's great from a guardrail perspective. From a value perspective, maybe not. Maybe it took you as long to set that up as it does for someone to write those articles because they only have to write 5.
Right. So it depends on what the need is, like what the client need is specifically. For something like Grover, I think that took me about 10 hours to build, and then we saved that in like the first 2 weeks, something like that. So it's fairly low stakes, but also, it's not a huge company. And so that kind of the small savings really do add up in terms of human effort. It definitely becomes more difficult as the program grows to have effective guardrails around it. But to be honest, what I'm seeing is that's a lot of, when especially people that have a specific job, right, like writing copy or writing Python or whatever, they tend to become very frustrated with the very open answers to that, like just using ChatGPT. Like I use very specific AI models that have access to specific data when I ask it about coding, because it's much better when it's been condensed and compacted and streamlined than if it's just kind of an open question. And I use Perplexity when I need to do a research thing instead of just ChatGPT, because it's more purpose-built for that thing. In the same way that we don't have, well, not always, but most software that we use has a purpose, and it does the thing very well, and it can do other things in that genre, but you're never going to go to Photoshop to write an essay, right? And so I think that AI is very quickly moving in the direction of you have those different programs that are good at those different things for those different use cases. And of course, there's still going to be the general